All right, man. So it's a pretty shocking story. So it looks like Krystal Ball from Breaking Points and the Kyle and Crystal podcast and Kyle Kulinski are actually getting into it in some pretty heated debates with the current vice presidential nominee for the Republican Party, JD Vance. You know, if you see him, he's going to ask you how long you've been here for, and then he's going to say good, and then move on to the next person. But so basically, what happened, of course, is during the debate, Donald Trump completely lied out of his ass and said that there were migrants in Springfield, Ohio, who were eating dogs and cats eating the pets. Obviously, completely false. It really just kind of set the whole world on fire. A lot of people like, yo, what is going on? But again, when Tim Walz says that the Republicans are weird, that is exactly what he's talking about. So pretty much what ends up happening is JD Vance goes on Twitter. He puts this long tweet here, this really long tweet. So, he sends out this tweet. I'll read some of it. It says, if you were to ask what caused me to change my tune about President Trump from 2016 to 2020, I could give you a few reasons. But what we're seeing in Springfield really drives it home. So he's trying to drive it with this because, he was not supportive of President Trump before. Now I guess he is. He says housing costs skyrocketing, communicable diseases on the rise, car accidents, crime, and insurance premiums moving up. Citizens complaining for months or longer and mostly ignored. But it's not just what's happening, it's the way our leadership responds to it. Confronted with many of their citizens begging for relief, our broken elites offer only scorn. By the way, the broken elite is JD Vance. He's the guy right there. He's completely faking it right here. He's a complete fake and a fraud. He says it's racist. They tell us to get angry at being unable to afford a home or to complain about being unable to drive a car safely down the streets paved by your neighbors or to call 911 because strangers are slaughtering geese in a public park. So now they're changing the goalposts again. They've ignored this town's problems for years. Now they pay attention not to focus their considerable wealth and power on helping their fellow citizens. So he just goes on basically to do all of this stuff. But the thing about what's going on here is they're trying to, what I think generally do, he's trying to do this like non-sequitur here where they make the claim that the migrants are eating cats and dogs, and then now it's a complete dodge where you completely jump to something else to try to sound intellectual and holier than thou. And it's a way to just do a red herring where it's like, oh, okay, let me get off the topic of that and talk about, the communicable diseases on the rise and the housing costs skyrocketing, etc., and all this stuff. So he basically goes on this. So these Haitian migrants are kind of considered de facto refugees, but they've been given temporary protected status here, so TPS, so they can't be deported and they're able to get work permits and stuff like that. There's I think Haitian gangs are taking over, and there's also been some really bad economic disasters. So I'd consider them de facto refugees here. But Zaid Jilani, I'm not exactly sure where he stands now, but I think he was kind of like one of those liberals who was. There's these weird liberal journalists or supposedly liberal like Matt Taibbi or Glenn Greenwald who kind of turned right wing. I don't know. I think he might have been the same kind of thing here. But he says Springfield was declining for years until they saw an increase in jobs and growth driven by people moving in. That means more wealth, healthier budgets, etc. Are there no upsides to immigration review? What about Usha's parents? Should they have stayed in India? And then he goes on another long tweet here, obviously to sound intelligent. Dude, I've always liked you, so maybe this should be a longer conversation, but come on. Are there no upsides to immigration? Is a radically different question from should we drop 20K people from a radically different culture in a small Ohio town in a matter of a few years? So again, he's not answering the question, so he's switching the question to a different question. In the tweet, it doesn't mention any good upsides of immigration. He makes it seem like all bad. So I think the question makes sense, and he's not really answering the question either. Even if you were to bring the 20,000 people, there's obviously a lot of benefits from that as well. And he says, he's been on the issue for months. Look, housing prices have gone up. It's great for the local residents or the people who don't own homes. Look at the number of Medicaid recipients. All of this stuff that he's saying about this kind of stuff, it's like the response obviously would be to give more resources to the area. And I think that Governor DeWine has been asking for that from the federal government, is to give more things. And so any of the community leaders, I think, in the areas who are like, hey, our hospitals are overrun, they're not like, oh, yeah, these horrible Haitians or whatever. They're saying like, hey, we need more resources to be able to help these people. So his response, instead of being like, oh, let's help them, because he's not a populist, right? He doesn't care about them. He is the elite that he's talking about. His response isn't, well, let's give more Medicaid funding or more hospital funding or have more workers there or, increase housing availability and pricing, etc. Those are not the things that he's saying, right? He's saying he's going after the immigrants instead, right? We're given temporary protective status. I would consider kind of de facto refugees. He's going after those people instead of saying that, like an actual person who's actual populist would say. Even Jimmy Dore, this crazy, he says the part you're leaving out is that those Haitian refugees are created by the oligarchs, Western economic hitmen, and imperialism. They love to see workers turn on even poorer, more desperate people instead of turning their attention on the people who created those refugees in the first place. So even Jimmy Dore is not going fully into this, and he's calling them refugees, which rhetoric is obviously important. So Jimmy Dore even is kind of like, all right, dude, like what exactly are you saying here? But Krystal Ball actually ends up getting into this. So she sends out a tweet. So Krystal Ball ends up jumping into this as well. So Krystal Ball says, when you insist on spreading neo-Nazi fueled smears about immigrants leading to bomb threats, it kind of closes the space for this intellectual discussion about pluses and minuses of immigration that you're now retreating to, dude. This is absolutely true. It's actually a great synopsis of what's going on too, because everyone's taking issue with, nobody would be like, oh man, you're saying that they don't have enough Medicaid funding because they have too many people? Oh, fuck you. Nobody's saying that, obviously. No, not a single person. The response, though, from rational people would be, oh, there's these migrants who have given temporary protective status because of being refugees from Haiti. Oh, let's give you more Medicaid funding. Let's increase funding for homes. Let's make it cheaper. That's the response. His response is like, nah, fuck them. Which is like, all right, dude, like, what is wrong with you? At that point, also, you kind of have to wonder about supremacy grounds in terms of, like, do you think Americans are, like, supreme humans to others? I don't know. But the other part, this is a good synopsis here, though, because it is, the problem people are taking is you're spreading these, like, Nazi straight rumors about, like, oh, lies, full lies, not rumors, sorry, it's just full lies, right, about, oh, they're eating cats and dogs. And so it's like, dude, that's what you do, and then you run away to all this, oh, intellectual stuff. Oh, it's not this crazy racist stuff. It's intellectualism. I'm so smart. I'm holier than thou. I'm talking about Medicaid funding. And then his response is obviously severely retarded in general anyways, because obviously the response to that is not the one that he's saying, where it's like, yeah, let's just be racist kind of thing. But JD Vance jumps in. He says, Krystal Ball, I really hate neoliberalism. I'm a populist. Also, Krystal Ball, anyone who doesn't think 20,000 cheap laborers should be dropped in a small Ohio town is a neo-Nazi. So again, he keeps doing this shit where he's like non-sequitoring, like non-stop. He keeps talking about that instead of what they're literally doing. And this is just straight gaslighting too. He literally just went on to like a tirade on a debate stage about this. And he's trying to gaslight us into thinking he's actually talking about this holier than thou thing about, oh, I just care about the poor, the whites who can't afford their houses or whatever. That's why I want to kick out the Haitian immigrants and not make housing cheaper or not increase Medicaid funding or any of that kind of stuff. No, not that kind of stuff. So he's trying to do that. Everybody's like, dude, this is what we're talking about. He's trying to pretend like the conversation is something else. But if the conversation were in the direction that he's trying to make it in, obviously the solution would not be what's given. But Krystal Ball's husband comes in and just goes off, so he explodes. So we got another one going on here. So Kyle Kulinski dropping in. He says, Mr. I'm a populist. JD Vance dodged a question on raising the minimum wage, didn't support the PRO Act, and skipped a vote on extending the child tax credit while virtue signaling like he supports it. You're a fucking fraud. Take your Ivy League elitist venture capitalist ass back to the 4chan message board or Peter Thiel's dick where you belong. The lie you spread about Haitians is literally from a Nazi group, Blood Tribe. So he just fudging, going off, just exploding all over the place. This is his wife, though, so it's personal, man. You can't go after Kyle's wife. He's about to fucking go off, right? But I think this is also a great response, too, because what this really goes to show you is there is no such thing as right-wing populism. The whole, like, Sagar and Jetty right-wing populism thing is not real. It's fake news. It doesn't actually exist. It's not a real thing. It's a way to package. This is a perfect example, too, because they go on this huge racist rant, massive, like totally smearing these Haitian, de facto refugees, right? And they just go on this huge smear thing. And then now they're trying to jump to something else, of which the response would not be, yeah, fuck those Haitian migrants. It would be, oh, well, let's give them more funding. The federal government should shift more funding because it's an emergency situation, right? That would be the natural response. That's not his response either, though. But it just goes to show that it's not populist, because his answer to that is not to help people. It's instead just to actually like go after the other people, the Haitians, right? The you got to go after, the brown skinned people. Those guys are not worth it. We don't want to increase funding to help them and the others around them. When instead we need to shaft the black people. That's what we need to do. So yeah, obviously these kinds of things would be someone who's actual populist, things like raising the minimum wage, supporting unions and the PRO Act, and all of these things about the child tax credit and all of this kind of stuff. These are the kinds of things that actually make you a populist. So again, this idea of like this right-wing populism is not real, and I think Kyle had a really, really good response here. I think both Kyle and Krystal actually both had really good responses here, because Krystal makes like a really good sort of response in terms of like, dude, nobody really took, and this wasn't even really a conversation about all the other crap, because he says, I've been talking about this for a long time. And then notice that the outrage only started now, right? So even when you were talking about whatever you're claiming to have been talking about before, there was no response like this. But as soon as you start spreading the crazy like neo-Nazi racist shit, that's why people start getting mad. And then now you're trying to retreat. You're trying to run backwards. You kind of like throw a lob, and then now you're running away back to your corner basically. And then you're just trying to stay in your corner, and you're trying to gaslight people as well. You're trying to gaslight everybody. And then Kyle comes in. Kyle kind of like sets the slam dunk. I guess I don't know if you want to think of it as like Krystal kind of alley-ooping and then Kyle kind of dunking it down. But I feel like Kyle dropping the dunk on of like, yo, you're not actually a populist. I guess they're like kind of tag teaming it like a husband and wife tag team. Progressive husband and wife tag team is pretty hilarious. But yeah, he's obviously not a populist because even his response to whatever holier than thou intellectual situation is obviously laughable, right? It's not the actual populist response. It's just the racist response, right? So pretty hilarious stuff here. But JD Vance going to Twitter to defend it. I don't know if he's getting desperate. He also doesn't appear to very much be in contact with Donald Trump, it seems, either. So pretty interesting stuff going on here. But he's trying to run away. He's trying to retreat. But Kyle and Krystal just going at it with JD Vance.